is a problem that every researcher, just a moment, students, that every researcher should try to solve. Every researcher should try to identify that problem, and they should try to solve that problem, whatever the problem they have identified. And as I discussed with you, that this is the very first step into the research process. And the research problem will help us to try to, and it will, with this, we'll be able to try to explain that what is the problem. Just a minute. That what is the problem, why the problem exists, how we can solve the problem, where this problem will lead and who is. So to identify the problem, first of all we need to go for a rigorous review of literature. So before identification of the problem, we must fulfill these conditions, that there must be an individual to whom the problem can be attributed. There must be two variables at least. The one should be the controlled one, the another should be the uncontrolled one. Because then only we can study the result of the problem or our research, that if on controlled population, how things reacts, and on uncontrolled situation or uncontrolled sample, uncontrolled population, how the things react. So we must have at least two variables to study. That is one. The one is the controlled one, and the another is the uncontrolled one. And definitely there should be two possible outcomes. Only then we will be able to come to the result, come to the output, that yes, this output will be there. And if this will not be done, then what will be the other another output? As we have started yesterday also, the hypothesis testing. Into that you must have started, there are two hypotheses, the null hypothesis and the alternate hypothesis, right? So when we are having two possible outcome, then only we will be having the alternate hypothesis, right? If we say that there is no relationship between the two variables, or the two variables, or any, there is no impact of the one variable on the another variable, right? So then it will be a null hypothesis. And when we are trying to prove that null hypothesis is true or not, so that means we have the two possible outcome. Either the null hypothesis will be true, that means it will be retained. If null hypothesis is rejected, that means the alternate hypothesis will be accepted, and alternate hypothesis will be retained. So that means there are two possible outcomes when it is already known that yes, there is no correlation in between these any two variables, right? So definitely there is no need of research into it, right? So when we will be having two possible outcomes, then only the need of research is there. When I say, for example, when I say when I want to study the impact of any legal aspect, as you all are the law students, so if I want to study the impact of any law on the particular, respond on the persons who will be affected by that law. So then in that case, either they will be affected or they will not be affected, right? So there are two possible outcomes. So then only I can do the research that whether they are affected or not, right? So these two possible outcome is very important, and it should be there, right? Then from where we can originate, or what are the various sources from where we can find out the problem? The very first is the personal experience, that we have experienced that this is the problem into the society, right? If I have experienced that something is going into the society and I believe this is not correct, it should be changed, there should be something more than that, this, right? So definitely I'll be going into the research, that why this is there, how can I improve it, what my suggestion could be there, so that I can give the suggestion to the government or to the other authorities, so that they can make the improvement into the particular existent law, right? So that that will be my personal experience, that what I want, what I have experienced, and what I believe that yes, the lacuna is there into the society. Or else if I have not identified any such person experience, then in that case I can review the various educational research journal. The various journals are there in which various articles and various research papers are there, right? So from the review of those articles and the journals, we can identify, yes, this article has been is studying this particular concept. So if I have started that, yes, they have started the, for example, you must have be aware about those who have started the corporate law, that uh, the CSR. Earlier, we were having only the corporate governance, right? We were not having any law by which the companies were legally abided to follow that corporate governance. It was just a choice of matter for the companies. Some companies definitely they were having those companies which were following the CSR and the, sorry, the corporate governance. They were having the good means they were having the credibility into the market. They were having the goodwill into the market, and definitely they were that impact of their goodwill and the credibility was shown into the stock exchanges too. But there was no such legal amendments for that. So people have started that, yes, many of the companies are also not following. There are many other companies who are not following the corporate governance. So gradually the research has been done, and the government has come up with the New Companies Act 2013, right, in which they have introduced the CSR, and gradually they are making the amendments. And now the CSR is being legal abided. The government is going to penalize the companies who are not fulfilling the CSR conditions, right? So this has been through the various researches only. This we have concluded, we have identified that yes, this was the problem and this could be the solution, right? So the same way we can further also we can study this, and we can identify that what will be the implication of this panel means penalties on the companies. Are companies going to actually spend the money on the CSR, or they are going to find some lacuna, some loopholes into the companies act? What will be the actual and real impact of this change into this legislation, right? So this could be started, this problem can be identified by the various previous researches, that what the previous researchers has said, and now we have find out that this, yes, this was the solution which has been given, and we believe that yes, this could be one of the problem, right? With the newspaper readings, yes, into the newspaper we have various articles. The various articles have been published into the newspaper. Also into the newspaper we have identified that yes, this is the problem into the society, and we must find some solution into the for this problem into the society. So for that we could have a research to find out the solution about that news, that problem which we have find it out that through the newspaper readings. The textbooks also provide us the various concepts, the various problems we can identify with the reading of the textbooks. Also the working paper and the white papers which are being provided by the various institutions, that yes, this is the working of some problem, what they have identified, what they are suggesting, and from the basis of these white papers, again we can identify the problem. And we can originate that yes, actually this is the problem which is being existence into the society, into this world, and yes, we can find out the solution to this problem. Again, the suggestions from the previous work, as I discussed with you, that we can study, we can go for the review of the various articles, various journal, various research papers. So we can go ahead from the suggestions of the of those previous work which is already being done. So whatever suggestion is being given, we can identify with the new research that whether these suggestions, whatever the suggestions being provided by the various authors or various researchers, are these suggestions being implemented? If yes, then what is the impact of those suggestions? What is the impact of those implications? If no, then why not these suggestions being inculcated, right? So this is how we can find out that yes, this is the actual problem which is being into the existence, and we can do some research about it, right? I believe it is being clear to all. Is there any doubt to any student into this? Okay, I consider the silence as there is no doubt. Then the various points which we should remember when we are going to identify the problem or the research problem, the very important that we should always avoid over researched topic. Any topic on which we the number of research has been done, definitely we will not be easily, it will not be first of all, it will not be easy to identify the research topic on that. Secondly, it means we will not be able to, definitely we will be having lot of research on that, definitely we will be having lot of data, lot of backup with us, but we will not be able to identify any new research problem on that, right? Controversial subjects should be avoided. Too narrow or too vague problem should also be avoided. The subject related for research, whatever the topic which we have considered for the research, it should be familiar with us. We should be that topic should be known to us. We should be able to understand that topic, and it should be feasible to do some research on that particular topic, right? For example, I cannot ask the law student to do some research into the technology, right? Can it be, because that topic is not familiar to you. So it should be the topic should be familiar to you. The subject which you are considering for the research, that should be familiar, and you must have interest into that topic. Any student who is having the means interest into the your corporate law or the taxation or into the family law cannot go into the those crime, right? Criminology or law of crimes, right? So the topic should be of your interest, and you must have some you must be familiar to that particular topic of research which you are considering as the problem. Second, the importance, qualification, training of researcher and cost should also be considered, right? You must be qualified to do the research. You must the importance of research should also be understood, should also be considered. The that why this research is being important, why I am going to do this research on this particular topic, it should also be considered while you are identifying the problem, right? And problem should be preceded by the preliminary study, very important. We must always not always, but yes, we should always try to go for the preliminary study, or we can say the pilot study, for any problem which we are identifying, that yes, this is the problem and this is how I'm going for the research into this topic, right? So into that I must go for the pilot study. What is pilot study? That before going into that rigorous research, I will be I'll be doing my research on a smaller sample, or I'll be identifying the impact. If suppose I'm going to study the impact of that particular law on the society. Now, society is very much big, right? I can study the impact of the law on the people in Delhi and NCR, on the people and at national level, on the people in the North India, or the people in the Southern India, or the people in East India, or the people in the West India. Means what topic I'm going to study, right? So then in that case, I need to identify, I need to go for a preliminary study, very small study with a very small sample size, right? So that will should be done. That means the pilot study is very much important, right? Then the techniques for the problem identification, the statement of problem should be identified in a general way. We should try to understand the nature of the problem, that what type of nature of the problem is there. We should survey the available literature which is there, and we should try to develop the ideas through the discussion. We should always try to discuss on the topic more and more, because as and when we will be discussing the topic, number of people we will be getting the ideas on that, how we can improve the research, how we can improve the topic too, right? And when we will be getting the idea, we will be gathering all the information from the various seven people, various knowledgeable persons. Then we can rephrase the research problem before starting the research exactly. Then again, what points should be considered while determining the research topic? Then that technical terms, phrase, or words should be explained into the research very clearly. Basic assumptions should be mentioned, right? Criteria for selection of problem should be mentioned, that why I have selected this particular topic. That means the justification of title should also be mentioned. Uh, then suitable time period, data sources should also be mentioned, that from where I'm going to get the data. Is my data, I'm going to get the data from the primary sources or from the secondary sources? What will be that suitable time? For example, I said that, yes, I'm going to do a study to study the impact of this particular law on the particular population, right? But I have not identified that at what time period, or what will be the time period when I'm going to study this impact. Might be possible duration, or in between of the duration of my study, the government has introduced some legislation, some new law. So definitely my research will be totally outdated at that moment of time. So shall I start my research from the scratch? No. What should I do? I should put that time tenure into my research, that yes, I have done this research uh, on this topic during this tenure, right? From July to September 2022, or from July to September 2021, or I have started this from January to December 2021, right? I need to mention that time period also into my research. Scope of the research and limitation of the research should also be clearly defined into the project. That what all limitation, that does not mean that this is the lacuna. Limitation should be explained into the research, that yes, this has not been included into the research, right? And further, whenever some other person will be starting the research on the same topic, then that person can consider these limitations as further suggestions, right? If suppose I have started any research, I have taken any research problem and I have started the area of study, my study was Delhi NCR. So some another person who is sitting into Bihar, or who is sitting into Kolkata, or who is sitting into Madurai or Tamil Nadu, or who is sitting into Kerala, they can take my topic, and as the geographical area was my limitation, so they can remove that limitation. They can go ahead that yes, they are doing this study into Kerala, someone is doing the same study into some another eastern state, or northeast states, right? So that at the end, may be possible some other person who will be doing some review of literature, some article they'll be writing, that they will be identifying that yes, this study was done into this particular region, this study was done into this particular region. I'm combining all the results of all the research studies, and I'm going to give a gist of all the studies. So we can come in one of the research problem, we can combine the result of all, right? So the limitation should be mentioned, should be clearly mentioned into the project too. I believe this is clear to all. So with this, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. In case you people face any problem, any doubt, then please let me know. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shishma Kushwaha. Now we will progress towards a workshop with the second speaker. The second speaker is Ms. Ashna, and her topic is doctrinal and non-doctrinal method of research, sources of doctrinal research, essentials of doctrinal research, sources of non-doctrinal research, essentials of non-doctrinal research, distinction between doctrinal and non-doctrinal, and various steps in empirical research. Over to Ashna, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Tanvi ma'am. Good afternoon to all my students and faculty members. Respected Deputy ma'am, Dr. Naresh Kumar Behal sir, Professor Dr. E.K. Tyagi sir. Thank you so much for providing me this opportunity to present in front of you. So the topic that has been assigned to me today is doctrinal and non-doctrinal research. Before starting my presentation, if I have to talk about just the terminology part of it, how do I put it? If I talk about doctrinal research, how exactly would I term? So doctrinal and non-doctrinal, both the terminology suggest an approach towards the research. So as a researcher, when you're writing your dissertation, you need to have a plan set, and this terminology gives you a plan of action in order to how to proceed with your research. So when you submitted your synopsis, if you have written under research methodology that I will, as a researcher, will be proceeding with a doctrinal research, I, as a researcher, would be proceeding with a non-doctrinal research. What exactly is your plan of action in concluding that research? This is what the entire presentation would be all about. If I'm talking about doctrinal research, what exactly is doctrinal research? So just give me a second, I'll try and share my screen. Okay, is my screen visible, Tanvi ma'am? If you can give me a heads up.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Your screen is visible.
All right, great. So firstly, I would like to discuss about doctrinal research. When I talk about doctrinal research, I talk about being it a theoretical form of research that involves conventional sources, traditional sources. That's one approach about doctrinal research. And what exactly are the sources that are there when we are doing or when we are conducting doctrinal research? So if you can see here, I have mentioned that it is a theoretical research and it is pure in nature. Conventional legal resources like reports of committees, legal history, judicial pronouncement passed by the legislature. So as a researcher, when I'm trying to proceed, my plan of action as a researcher is to go with the doctrinal research. What exactly would I go for? What exactly would be the materials that I would look for? Doctrinal research, we also refer it to as the armchair research. Why do we, I think Pallavi ma'am also covered it in very briefly in her presentation on the day of inaugural. When we talk about armchair research, what exactly is armchair research? Armchair research is a library-based study where the researcher goes, read the material that are required in form of archives, in form of databases that are there in order to support the work of the researcher. Am I audible? Okay. So doctrinal research means a research that has been carried out on legal propositions. It asks what the law is on a particular issue. It is concerned with analysis of the legal doctrine and how it has been developed and applied. So in the doctrinal research, we concern ourselves with some legal problem or issue or question that has been referred in the theoretical form, and we take those problems, those issues in question and try and resolve that through our research. So research is all about bridging the gap that is there, and you as a researcher try and fulfill that gap. So here when we talk about doctrinal research being a plan of action for you as a researcher, you take the material, you try and figure out, for example, if you're going through a research paper, what the research paper is all about. You try and gather an idea. And what that particular author is lacking in that research, you try and bridge that gap through your review, through your research. And you try and inculcate that in your research. So this is one approach that we take as a researcher when we're trying to conduct a doctrinal research. Doctrinal research also covers a broad category of theories, a broad category of concepts that are already existing. And you as a researcher is trying to figure out how you can use that already available data in your research to support your research. Moving on, this is what I have tried to cover. So when we talk about doctrinal research, we think of three things here: read, analyze the material, formulate a conclusion, write up a study result. Now, the doctrinal research is a process. So first, as a researcher, if I talk about armchair research, you go to a library, you read, you analyze the material, you think whether you can use it or you can discard the material that you have gone through. You try and formulate from the abstract of the research paper, whether that particular paper, that particular article, that particular book chapter is relevant to your research or not. Then you try and write up the relevant points as a study result, which will further contribute to the research. Now, moving back to the sources of doctrinal research. The doctrinal research sources include conventional customary legal sources, textbooks, case laws, statutes, enactments, portals, websites, report of the committees, legal history, judgment, and commentaries. These all could be the aid that you need in order to support your research. So this is what I initially discussed. If I talk about doctrinal research and its characteristics, I talk about it being a study that is based on a legal proposition, the reason for the decision which is legally binding, and that being creating a precedent. The sources of data for a doctrinal researcher are the reports of the appellate courts and the conventional legal theory. It is concerned with the particular doctrine of law says and what made the authority to say, or what has been the impact of that particular judgment in question. Okay. Now moving on to the non-doctrinal research. For those of you who have mentioned in their research methodology that they'll be going by a non-doctrinal research, non-doctrinal we also refer it to as empirical research. We also refer it to as socio-legal research. Now, what do we mean by socio-legal research? Just breaking down the terminology part of it, if I have to talk about socio-legal research as an aspect, what comes to my mind? I see a problem that is existing in a society. I try and study that problem, that social problem or that issue in question, and I try and resolve it through my research. Now, how do I do that? How do I conduct a socio-legal research? I figure out a problem, like how Shishma ma'am explained identification of a problem. When you're covering society at large, you try and identify a problem. You collect data as to what is missing in terms of the problem that you're looking for. Has it been substantiated by the data that is available? Now, how do you collect that data? You collect that data in the form of questionnaires. You collect that data in the form of focus groups. You collect that data in the form of surveys. So if, for example, if I'm trying to do non-doctrinal research, as a researcher here, I am working on dominant digital platforms. If I talk about digital platforms, those OTT platforms also come into the purview of those digital platforms. I talk about Netflix, I talk about Woot, I talk about Hotstar. All these digital OTT platforms have a certain registration fee, and those registration fee varies platform to platform. Now, as a researcher coming from a competition law background, I would try to figure out whether that OTT platform is involved in predatory pricing, whether that OTT platform is doing abuse of its dominant position. All these aspects, as a researcher, I would try and analyze. And if I come to a conclusion that yes, that particular OTT platform is involved in, let's say, predatory pricing, I would try and collect data for it in the form of survey and questionnaires, or I create a focus groups and I take their comments into question. I hope I am clear on the non-doctrinal part of it. How do I go about conducting a non-doctrinal research? There's another approach where I talk about mixed research. So two major research approaches that I discussed was doctrinal and non-doctrinal, but mixed research is also a part of it and very well accepted in the research field, because as a researcher, it shows that you're willing to go to the length in order to cover the theory part as well as the empirical part of it. So mixed research is always preferred, and I will be moving on. This is what I have talked about, if you want to go through it. So these are these sources that I discussed. What exactly, if I'm trying to conduct a non-doctrinal, social-legal, or empirical research, what would be my tools as a researcher? I have no idea where to collect data, how to categorize a group of people in order to provide me that data. I will go for these tools, and these tools would be the source of my research in a doctrinal approach. So questionnaire, interviews, observation, focus group discussion, they all become my tools of research when I'm conducting an empirical research. Now, drawing a comparison between the two types of approaches that are there, doctrinal and non-doctrinal. Doctrinal emphasizes on the legal principles. Non-doctrinal, there's lesser emphasis on the doctrine. For example, when I talked about the digital platforms bit, the theory part would be covered by the Competition Law 2002, predatory pricing. What exactly is predatory pricing? And digital platforms, it being a new concept, and how the earlier legislation is coming into play when the current issue in hand is a digital one. So that evolution from the traditional to the digital one would be, figured out by you as a researcher. So the theory part you have covered in terms of the act that is there, that is already there, Competition Act, and the data part of it as a researcher, you will try and establish. And in the doctrinal research, we use traditional sources of data, and in non-doctrinal, it is not fully dependent on the traditional conventional sources. Any trained law professional personnel can do non-doctrinal research, doctrinal research, whereas when we do a non-doctrinal research, you need to have a particular skill sets. You need to have certain hands-on capability when we talk about non-doctrinal research. Here, you as a scholar, as a researcher, you try and figure out an answer for one or two legal propositions. It covers a wide variety, where a non-doctrinal would cover not just one aspect, two aspects, but broader aspects, comparing to the tools that you are trying to inculcate in your research. As discussed, doctrinal research is a theoretical study, and non-doctrinal is an empirical field study. Now, if as a researcher, I am conducting a doctrinal research, what would be the merit of that particular approach that I'm adopting as a researcher? So as a researcher, I will analyze the case law, I will analyze the judicial pronouncements that are there, and it is already there, so it would be less time consuming for me to pen it down in my research. Whereas if I talk about non-doctrinal research, it would take me some time in order to gather the data for my researcher. So in terms of time consumption, it creates a distinction. It provides lawyers, judges, and others with the instruments to reach a legal decision. quick answers to the legal problems. It also helps out in pointing out the inbuilt loopholes, gaps, inconsistencies that are there in the substantive law. So as a researcher, when you're following this approach, as the doctrinal approach, you see the law is there, the framework is there, everything is given to you in a particular framework. You try and identify what exactly is missing. So for you as a researcher, it gets the area gets very focused to work on. But whereas when your approach is a non-doctrinal one, you try and figure out, let's say you circulated a survey, you circulated a questionnaire, you circulated a Google form. So as per the response, you try and figure out what the mean would be. For example, question 1, how many responses did I get for question 1? You will take a mean of that question 2, question 3, and the total mean of it. And then you would reach a conclusion whether this particular questionnaire as a tool is supporting your research or not. So that way, the merits and demerits is always there about any approach. So moving on, merits and demerits. This is the final conclusion part of it. If you have any question regarding how to go about if you're adopting a non-doctrinal, because for doctrinal, we already have the data, we already have the legislation, we already have the precedents, we already have the database to try and figure out. But when we go about non-doctrinal or the social legal research, there comes a hindrance where you as a researcher feel stuck in how to go about it, what would be your plan of action, how to set that plan in motion. So if you have any query, I'm here to help you out. I would like to open the floor for any questions. You can raise your hand and ask your question. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am, for the elaborate discussion about doctrinal and non-doctrinal research. Now I would like to call the third speaker for today's session. The third speaker is Ms. Sunena, and her topic is role of tools of data collection in legal research, distinction between primary and secondary data. Over to Sunena, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, Sunena, ma'am. We're just making you the co-host so that you will be able to speak. You will be speaking in a while. Just permit me to make you co-host. Give me a second. Okay, Sunena, ma'am, I think you will be able to speak now.
Yes, ma'am. I'm able to unmute myself now.
Okay.
Let me share my screen. Please allow me to share my screen. Thank you so much, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Pallavi ma'am, Dr. Behel sir, Tyagi sir, and all the organizing committee for giving me this opportunity to present my views on the topic of role of data collection tools and difference between primary and secondary data. So let me start with this. Tanvi ma'am, I am not able to switch on my camera, so please forward me. So if I talk about what are the different steps in research, so this is formulating the research problem, literature review, developing the objectives, preparing the research design, collecting the data, analysis of data, generalization and interpretation, and report writing. So you can see if I go about all these steps that are involved in research. So data collection or collection of data is the middle, or I can say that it is in the middle compartment, and it is the middle approach between the formulation of research problem and the result of the research. Data collection is one of the most important part of research, as Ashna ma'am was just explaining before you people. What are the different methods of research? So she was doctrinal research is there, non-doctrinal research is there, and mixed approach is there. So be it any kind of method that you are opting for your research, be it doctrinal, non-doctrinal, and be it mixed research, for every kind of research you need some data so that you can work upon your research. So if you are able to collect your data properly, then automatically you will be able to channelize your research properly, and you will be able to get good results out of that data. Now I will be
sorry,
straight away.
Sunana ma'am. I'm so sorry, Sunana ma'am. There is an
Yes,
instruction by the higher authorities that you have to open your cameras. I'm so sorry for the interruption.
Ma'am, yes, I was not able to on my camera. That is why I could not. Yes, because I was getting the message that I cannot switch on my video because it has been stopped by the host. So yes, so I have explained till now I have explained before you people what is the important data collection. So now I will be coming to the topic of classification of data. So if I talk about what kind of data we need for our research, so we can divide that data into two categories, that is primary data and secondary data. So it is more or less related to the kind of method or the method that we are going to opt for our research. So be it doctrinal, non-doctrinal, and be it mixed research. So depending on the method that we are going to opt for our research, on that method only, the kind of data that we require will also depend upon. So now I will be explaining before you people what is primary data. So primary data is one such data that the researcher is collecting for the first time for his or her research. Say for example, if I want to conduct a research on impact of COVID-19 on the education system or on the higher education, or let me more simplify this, if I want to conduct a research on the impact of COVID-19 on the students of GIMS Greater Noida. So for that matter, what can I do is, I will have to do a primary collection of data. So I will be collecting this data from you people only. I will be collecting this data from all of my students. So I will be giving them few questions, and what will be like, how can I collect this data? This will be there in further slides. So this is the data that I collected from you people for the first time, and this is the primary data. So primary data is also known as the original data because that is being collected for the first time by the researcher himself, and it is not being taken from someone else's work. So primary data means if we are collecting anything for our research for the first time on our own, so that will be the meaning of primary data. Examples of primary data. First example I have already given you, like if you are going to study anything for the first time, like impact of COVID-19 on that particular area or on this segment or on that segment. So you can generally collect your data and you can analyze that data so that you can reach to a conclusion whether it was a positive impact or it was a negative impact. Another example, which is most commonly used example here, is census conducted by the government. So every 10 years, government has conducted a census for just knowing what is the status of the population, how many categories are there in each of the segment of the population. So census is one of the most important and most highlighted example of the primary data collected by anyone for his or her research, like for government, sorry. What are the different advantages of primary data? So advantages are so many because first of all, you yourself is collecting your data, so there will not be any chances of discrepancy, or that the data that you are collecting is not useful. It will not be a problem there, because you yourself is the data collector. So that will not be a problem that the data collected by you was not useful. It is highly reliable because you were there to observe this at each and every step. So this is highly reliable. Then quality of data collected is not doubtful and it is very much meaningful. So you cannot have any doubt, because you have collected this yourself, so you cannot have a doubt on the genuinity of this data. And it may lead to the discovery of additional data and information during its collection. So maybe when I am collecting data for one aspect of my research, so it may also be possible that I may also end up in collecting data for some aspect, or I may also end up in collecting some additional information that may be useful in future as well. Disadvantages are also there in relation to the primary data, like costing is very high. If I have to go to every place for collecting data, so obviously costing will be high. Then problem in designing the data collection tool. So there are so many tools that I can use for collecting this data, like questionnaire interviews, which I will be explaining further in my slide. So first of all, the problem that I will have is how to design that questionnaire. So sometimes I may not have the expertise to design the correct questionnaire, or I may not have the expertise to find out the correct tool which I should use for collecting this data. So that is another disadvantage. Next is inadequate or irrelevant responses. So sometimes when I'm going to collect the data, suppose many a times what we do is, say for example, you people must be receiving your feedback form during the course of this FDP or this workshop. So many of you might not be responding to this feedback form even after we will be asking you people to fill it as soon as possible, or for so many after so many reminders you will not be filling it on your own. So that is something which every person who is collecting the primary data have to face this problem, because the person to whom we are approaching for the collection of data, sometimes or most of the times they are not responsive. So it becomes very difficult for us to collect the data there. Now question is, what is the secondary data? So relating back to the Ashna's ma'am lecture, she was talking to you about the doctrinal research. So the part which I was explaining to you now, it was related to the non-empirical research or the non-doctrinal research. Now secondary data is related to the doctrinal research. So secondary data is something which has already been collected by someone. It is already there. I just need to analyze that data. So I can simplifying that, I can say that secondary data is that data which has already been collected by someone else, but I am using that data for my own research. Advantages, like first of all, let me explain with one more example. Earlier I gave you the example of that if I want to study the impact of COVID-19 on the higher education. So for that matter, I can use my own population on whom I will be conducting that research, and I can generate first-hand data, and I can analyze that, and I can interpret that data to understand the impact on the students of the COVID-19, right? Secondly, maybe I don't have that much time to go to every other student and to analyze and interpret that result on such a scale. So for that matter, what can I do is I can study some other data that has already been, or I can use the studies that has already been conducted by so many people in that area. So say for example, you must have seen so many newspaper articles during COVID-19, and they were highlighting the impact of COVID-19 on different sectors. So one day you came across one of the article which was talking to you about the impact of COVID-19 on higher education. So you simply you can refer that article in your research, or on the same line you can also find out different articles or different notes, different commentaries in different books or journals or on various websites, you can find out different data relating to the impact of COVID-19 on education. So that will be your secondary data. So one thing was when you collected your own data for the first time, so that was your primary research with the help of primary data. But then you were relying on the data that has already been collected by somebody else. So that is your secondary data. Or if I take the example of census, say for example, government has already conducted the census and they have given you the result, like how many men are there, what is the number of women in the country, how many children are there, how many, like they will be giving you different segments of different age group. Now you want to conduct a study wherein you want to study the like amount or differentiation between the population in a particular village, how many, like why there is such a distribution which is not equal. There are 50 male and 100 female. So if you want to study on that particular phenomena, you want to know the reason of that classification, or you want to know the reason behind that difference between the male and female, then for that matter, first of all, you will be taking the data from the government census. So by this, what it means, you are taking the help of a secondary data. So advantages are so many, easy to collect because it is very easy to go just open our laptop and open different websites and refer to different areas, and we just can collect data. It is cost and time effective. It's just a matter of 1 or 2 days or even few hours. If we are sitting on our laptop or if you are going to a library, it is very easy for us to collect the data, and it is very cost effective as well. And next is information has already been analyzed by somebody else. So we just need to interpret that in our own words. So that is again a very easy task. And lastly, field work is very less. Disadvantage, unreliable. It is unreliable because most of the time we can't believe on the data that has already been collected by somebody else, and it is not of that high quality. Then now I will be talking about the tools of the data collection. So if I talk about the collection of primary data, so primary data can be collected for our research by using different methods. So my topic here is the tools of data collection. So methods, I will not be focusing on these methods because these methods will be dealt in by the other faculty members. So I will be taking out these methods and I will just be focusing on the tools that you can use. So first method is observational method. So observation method is basically used in the behavioral sciences. Like if I want to observe the conduct, if I want to see how many students are able to understand my lecture. So while I can observe your facial expressions, I can see how you people are reacting to what I am saying. So observational method is such a method whereby I am just observing from my own senses that how, like, there are certain parameters which I can fix on. So I will just be observing somebody's behavior on the set parameters. Say for example, if I want to open a hotel at some place, if I want to open a hotel chain, so I cannot open it anywhere and everywhere. So for that matter, I will be doing a research as to in which area I should open that. So I have 5 areas or I have 5 options. So I will be going to each of these areas. I will see how many people are there, how these people are reacting to some of the new options. So like that, I can observe and I can find out at that which will be the best place for me to open a new hotel chain. Tools that I can use is checklist or direct observation. So direct observation is, say for example, if you have been hired by someone, like you people must be finding out the jobs now, all the students here. So you must be knowing something about the probational period. So for that matter, if somebody is hiring you and he's saying, I will be observing your work for next 5 days. So here that he will be observing your throughout, like your whole conduct, what you were doing, how was your expressions and how you were, you know, ready to work like that. So that is direct observation. Second is checklist method. So in checklist tool, what you will do is you will define a certain parameter. Say, for example, if you must have conducted some of the competitions in your college and you were in the organizing committee, so you must have prepared a checklist that how many marks for each of these categories. So that is the checklist observational method. Next is survey method. In survey method, that is a tool or it is a process or a technique in which you can gather different kind of information or bulky information you can collect from n number of people, and that will be very easy for you and that will be very helpful for you to conduct that survey. Next method is interview method, in which you can ask n number of questions from different number of people related to your research. So you can conduct that interview. You can have it face to face, you can have it virtually, or you can also conduct it via audio video conferencing. Now question is, what are the tools for conducting interviews? So you can have an audio recorder and a video recorder, with the help of which you can record all your interviews, and later on you can interpret and analyze all that what you have recorded on these tools or on these devices. Next is questionnaire. So questionnaire is again a good tool for the collection of data. So like we are giving you different feedback forms, or internship committee is giving you different kinds of forms for filling that. So these are form of questionnaires. So that is again a very good tool, and that is also very important to understand what is the importance of questionnaire. So when I have to ask so many questions from the people and I cannot approach them directly, or in interview or in questionnaire, difference is there that in interview I will be asking n number of questions which will not be to the point or specific, but in questionnaire it will be helpful for me when I have to ask them to the point and short questions. So questionnaire is again a very helpful tool. What are the tools for conducting questionnaire or data collection by the questionnaire? Is Google form or manual questionnaire. So right now, if any one of us is conducting any kind of research, or for that matter any other work, so we are giving you different kind of Google forms. Say for example, during COVID-19, every exam that was being conducted for you people was through the Google form. So that is again a very good tool for conducting the data collection via questionnaire method. Now question is, how can we collect secondary data? So all this while I was explaining before you people, how can you collect the primary data that you are collecting for the first time. Now next is collection of secondary data. So secondary data, we all must be knowing. Throughout our law course, we have done this, like we have referred to so many internet sources, we have referred to different published or unpublished work, newspaper, books, and libraries, and various databases like we have Manupatra, Hain Online, Play Stores. So all these are the places from where you can collect your secondary data, and these were the tools for the collection of the secondary data. So with this, I end my speech for the day. Thank you so much. If you have any question, any doubt, you can ask me.
Okay, thank you so much, Sunaina ma'am, for the in-depth explanation about the topic. I would like to call the next speaker for the session. The next speaker is Ms. Manisha Madhav, and her topic is use of sampling in legal research. What is sampling? Advantages of sampling, various kinds of sampling. Example, simple random sampling, stratified sampling, cluster, multi-stage sampling. Over to Manisha, ma'am.
Thank you, Tanvi, ma'am. Once again, thank you, Tanvi, ma'am. So, first of all, I would like to thank HOD ma'am and all the members of the organizing committee for giving me this opportunity to speak on the given topic. So my topic is sampling in research, various kinds of research, whether it is social research or legal research, and the types of sampling and all those things. So basically, the main objectives will be to learn the reasons for the sampling, to develop an understanding about different sampling methods, also to distinguish between the two broad types of sampling, that is probability and non-probability sampling. And at the last, what are the relative advantages and disadvantages of sampling in research? So first of all, I would just like to explain the meaning and the concept of sampling. The purpose is to draw conclusions or inferences about the whole from few who represents the whole of the population, in order to provide various types of statistical information of a qualitative and quantitative nature. So basically, if you want to do a research upon any kind of qualitative research upon a class of group of people, then you cannot just go and interview all the individuals of population. Okay, you cannot just interview all the individuals of an entire nation. So what you can do is that you can select few individuals from the entire population, and that few individuals would be your sample. So in this way, you can just test, or you can just draw conclusions or inferences from the whole, and with regard to few who represents the whole of the population. So basically, sampling means the process of selecting a part of the population, and a population is the group of people that are studied in a research. It is difficult to study the whole population due to the limited resources. Therefore, in order to save time, in order to maybe save resources, and it is a part of the it's just because of the limited resources available with the researchers, sampling is one of the best technique to study. Now, the reliability of the findings of the research depends upon how well the researcher selects the sample. A sample should be a true representative of the whole population, and therefore it should include members from various sections and spheres of the population. Yes, ma'am.
Nisha ma'am, I'm so sorry to interrupt you in between. We've got an instruction from higher authorities with regard to your camera. I mean, please switch on your camera.
All right, no problem. 1 second, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no, it's okay. I hope I'm visible, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. So I was talking about the definition and the concept of sample. So sample is a smaller collection of units from a population used to determine truths about that population. And also, 1 second. Also, when we talk about population, so population refers to all those people who possess the characteristics which the researcher wants to study with regard to the context of a particular research problem. And the selected part of the same population is known as the sample. Thus, it is a portion of the people drawn from the population. And when we talk about sample unit, it is either a single element or maybe a collection of elements subject to the data analysis in the sample. A sampling unit is not necessarily as individual. It may be an event, it may be a city, maybe a village or nation, depending upon the research. Okay, it can be, suppose we want to research on various activities of maybe children from the age of 6 to 14, so maybe women, maybe teenagers. So it depends upon the research. Sample size, when we talk about sample size, the number of people in a selected sample is known as the sample size, and it is the complete list of all units or elements from which the sample is drawn. So we have to frame a sample design on the basis of which the researcher is actually looks forward for the different sampling technique. Maybe it can be random sampling, it can be non-probability sampling. So you have to build up a sampling frame, which is the complete list of elements from which the sample is actually drawn. This is also known as the working population, as it provides the list that can be operationally worked with. Also, when we talk about sampling frame, it is not a sample. Instead, it provides the basis for sampling. It reflects who will be included in the sample. And yes, talking about sampling technique, it refers to the technique or procedure used to select the members of the sample. Now you can see that sample can be, it depends upon the research. So maybe all doctors or maybe school children. You can also divide on the basis of age groups, maybe Indians on the basis of nationalities, women aged 15 to 45 years, or maybe it can be any other groups or any other sample. So there are three factors which influence sample representativeness: sampling procedure, sample size, and participation of the individuals. And whether you can go for sampling the entire population or not. So basically, when you want to choose the sample which is the entire population, it is very difficult. But yes, you can go for it only when the population in itself is very small. Then you can go for sampling the entire population. Also, when you have extensive resources, and thirdly, when you don't expect a high response, then also you can go for sampling of the entire population. So you can see this graph where I've tried to explain that what do you want to generalize to. This is the major or the base entire population. Then what population can you get access to? Then how can you get access to them? And who is in your study? Finally, you can just select the individuals from the entire population. This is what is known as your sampling frame. You need to build up this frame in order to in order to draw adequate conclusions, or in order to infer conclusions based upon your research. So first of all, in this diagram also, you need to target the entire population. From that, you need to study the population. And from there, you need to choose few individuals whom you should study and whom you should study in detail so as to reach an adequate conclusion. So when it comes to types of sampling, basically, sample is of broadly, it is of two types. One is your probability sampling, and second is your non-probability sampling. So as the name suggests, probability means chances of being selected, probability of being selected. So it is a type of sampling where each member of the population has a known probability of being selected in the sample. When a population is highly homogeneous, each of its member has a known chance of being selected in the sample. For example, if you flip a coin, there is equal chance that whether it will be head or whether it will be tail. So there is an equal chance of, head or tail. In the same way, in probability sample, when the population is actually highly homogeneous, each of its member has a equal chance of being selected in the sample. Now, this probability sampling is, again, it is divided into 6 types. First is your simple random sampling. Second is your systematic sampling. Third, stratified sampling. Fourth, cluster sampling. Fifth, multi-stage sampling. And last one is your multi-phase sampling. So let's begin with the first type, that is your simple random sampling. Here, the members of the sample are selected randomly. Okay, random selection is done, and purely it is by chance. Each member has an equal chance of being selected in the sample. This type of sampling is suitable for a population which is highly homogeneous. Second is your systematic sampling. So under this method, a member occurring after a fixed interval is studied. For example, there are 10 individuals, okay, in the population. Suppose I have selected the second individual. So now I will select every second individuals from that sequence, okay, second, then fourth, then sixth, then eighth, then 10th. So on this basis, there should be a sequence of selection. Okay, so a member occurring after a fixed interval is studied, and it is also known as the nth element, because every second individual, or if I choose to select third individual, then every third individual, okay, every third person will be studied. The sample is obtained by drawing every nth person from a predetermined list of persons. So this is what is called as systematic sampling. Third is your stratified random sampling. Now here the population is divided into subgroups known as strata, and then members from each strata are selected randomly. The division of population into homogeneous strata is based on one or more criteria. Maybe let's take an example. Criteria can be on the basis of religion, it can be on the basis of education, nationality, age, occupation, etc. And the fourth type is your cluster sampling. Under this, the various segments of a population are treated as clusters, and members from a cluster are selected randomly. The researcher does not divide the population into subgroups, but uh, he just randomly select from already existing or naturally occurring subclusters of the population. So this is with regard to stratified and cluster sampling. When you see both these types of sampling, the basic difference between strata and cluster is that when we talk about cluster sampling, the suppose there are 4 clusters which the researcher have identified, but he will only use one of these cluster for the purpose of his research. But when we talk about stratified sampling, then suppose there are 4 strata which have been identified by the researcher, then the researcher will select uh, each individual from every strata, okay, unlike in case of cluster sampling. So this is the basic difference between cluster and stratified sampling, because most of the times people get confused with regard to cluster and stratified random sampling. So this is the basic difference. Next is your multi-stage sampling. So under multi-stage, the sampling is done through various stages, okay, but only the last sample of the subject is studied, only the last sample. For instance, suppose you want to conduct a study of the proper implementation of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan in Delhi. So now Delhi is divided into various zones, namely east, west, south, and north. So in each zone a sector is selected, and from each sector 3 localities are selected, and then this last element, these localities will be studied. So this is known as the multi-stage sampling, where sampling is done through various stages. Stages are multiple, but only the last sample of the subject is being studied. And the next one is your multi-phase sampling. So here the process is very much similar to multi-stage sampling, that is primary selection, secondary selection, tertiary selection, and so on. However, in multi-phase sampling procedure, each sample is adequately studied before drawing another sample from it. For instance, one who wants to conduct a study of the proper implementation of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan in Delhi, firstly, all the sectors of the Delhi are studied, and only those sectors are chosen where there is improper implementation of the program. Out of these, those sectors are selected where the ineffectiveness is on the part of the people and not authorities. So you can see the difference. Thereafter, 5 localities are drawn from each of those sectors for the research. So this is all about your random sampling method. So based upon your technique, based upon your result, you can choose any of the random sampling method. Now next comes your the second broad category is your non-probability sampling. So it is a type of sampling where each member of the population does not have known probability of being selected. So there are very less chance of being selected, okay, and each member of the population does not get an equal chance. Non-probability sampling is adopted when each member of the population cannot be selected, or when the researcher deliberately want to choose members selectively. Okay, so there is no probability of being selected in case of non-probability sampling. And the various types of non-probability sampling are, first of all, it is purposive sampling, second, convenience sampling, third, snowball sampling, and the last one is your quota sampling. So when we talk about the purposive sampling, under this method, the members of the sample are selected according to the purpose of the study. Okay, because as the name suggests, purposive. So they are selected according to the purpose. What is the purpose of your research? So it is also known as judgmental sampling, as the researcher purposely chooses those people whom he thinks are relevant for the research. Okay, whom he thinks are relevant for the research. Now, second is convenience sampling. So it is only those people in this type of technique, those people are selected which are accessible to the researcher. For example, if I want to conduct a research on any topic, and where I need to, select few members. So rather than going on selecting any other members, what I'll do is that what is convenient for me, I'll just ask my friends who stays nearby, or I'll just ask my colleagues who stays nearby, because these people are accessible to me. Okay, so those people are selected which are accessible to the researcher. This study is conducted on all those persons who are most conveniently available. It is also known as accidental or haphazard sampling, because because it is, based upon one's convenience, based upon the researcher's convenience. So might be you won't get the desired result. Okay, you won't get the adequate result. Okay, so that is why it is also known as accidental sampling. Third one is just snowball sampling. So it is a type of sampling where one respondent identifies other respondents for the study. It is also known as chain sampling, chain system. Okay, so it is adopted in situations where it is difficult to identify the members of the sample. One person is identified. Suppose I have selected one person or one individual, and that individual will identify two more individuals, and then those two individuals will identify two more individuals on their part. So it is a kind of chain system, right? So one person is identified, and that leads to another respondent, and in this way that sample goes on growing like a snowball. This is continued until the required sample size is achieved, or until no more respondents are discovered. Okay, now next is your quota sampling. In this type of sampling, the members are selected according to some specific characteristics chosen by the researcher, which serve as a quota for the selection of the members. This is similar to stratified sampling, with the difference that instead of diving the population into strata and randomly choosing the respondent, it works on quotas fixed by the researcher. This is the main, you can say, the difference between random sampling and, sorry, probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Also, when we talk about, yeah, also when we talk about the advantages of sampling, then of course, as I've told you, that it is very cost effective, because you cannot study the entire population at one time. So in order to reduce cost and in order to save time, it is very much suitable for the researcher to go for sampling technique. And sample is easy to select. Suitable sampling frame can be identified easily. Sample evenly spread over entire reference population. Disadvantages can be that it may be biased sometimes. For example, convenience sampling, because a researcher chooses those individuals who are accessible to him. Okay, maybe they are not that related to the research, but still, because it is convenient for the researcher, that is why those persons or those individuals have been chosen. So uh, it is difficult to assess the precision of estimate from one survey, and also it may be biased if hidden periodicity in population coincides with that of the selection. It may at times be biased also. Now, already I have explained the difference between strata and the cluster. Yeah. Now, what sampling method you recommend? So first of all, determining proportion of undernourished 5 years old in a village, investigating nutritional status of preschool children, selecting maternity records for the study of previous abortions or duration of postnatal stay, and in estimation of immunization coverage in a province, data on 7 children aged 12 to 23 months and 30 clusters are used to determine proportion of fully immunized children in province. So you need to give reasons why cluster sampling is used in these type of research. Okay, so first of all, researcher is actually, when he wants to conduct such studies, then he will just divide the entire population into various clusters, maybe 3 cluster, 4 cluster, 5 cluster, and then he can just choose one cluster for his further study. In this way, cluster technique is being applied to draw conclusions in these type of researchers. So this is with regard to the difference between and the concept and meaning of sampling techniques, probability and non-probability sampling based upon your own research, depending upon your own research. One should choose which technique is more suitable for the researcher and can further work on the given technique. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tanvi ma'am.
Thank you so much, Manisha ma'am. Thank you so much. We are done for the day. I would like to propose a vote of thanks. I would like to thank our esteemed chairman, Dr. Amit Gupta, for giving us an opportunity to come up with a faculty development workshop and workshop on project writing. I would also like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our head of the department, Professor Dr. Pallavi ma'am. Thank you so much for giving us an opportunity. I would also like to thank Professor Dr. Behel and Professor Dr. Tyagi sir for helping us in coming up with a project, coming up with a session with regard to project writing. Thank you so much. We still have 13 days left in order to complete the session. We will be meeting tomorrow again with 3-4 more speakers down the line. Please, I have already forwarded feedback links to every student in their class group. I kindly request every student to fill all the feedbacks and get back. Okay, thank you so much.